Something I see in people so often is this struggle that their life has no meaning, that they have no real purpose or don't mean anything to the world. And yet God says so much about how highly He values us, how He has created each of us special for a unique mission and purpose. It's actually really incredible. My name is Whitney Pelahowski, and I'm part of the Revolution family, where we know that you matter because God says you matter.
Hey, my name is Nathan. If it's your first time here with us, I welcome you, and I've only been here a couple weeks, so if we haven't met yet, I have a funny last name. It's Pelahowski, but I would love to connect with you on social media, so find me on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, and I would love to get to know your story a little bit. We're in the middle of this series that we called You Matter. It's right here. You'll see it everywhere, and so today when you leave, we have these bracelets that we would love for you to take. They have all different colors, so whatever your favorite color is, like we will just judge you on what color bracelet you wear. But take one of these bracelets. It's real simple. All it says is you matter. And really why we want you to have this is we want you to live this mission out. And I wear these bracelets or these different type of bracelets all the time. What I like about the You Matter one is like, hey, when you're sitting in traffic and the person in front of you is going really slow or can't drive very well and you're ready to say something you know you shouldn't say, hopefully on your steering wheel you see your bright red You Matter and like, hey, you change your mind, don't say it. Or that I've realized like if you're in Kokomo, for some reason I think Kokomo has the longest stoplights in America. So like when you're getting mad there, you can wear the You Matter. When you're at the gym and someone's making you upset, just wear this. Also though, maybe it'll start a conversation and then you'll get to tell people, hey, this is what we mean by that. But just it's an easy way to kind of live out this mission. And also, I encourage you to do this. I don't know if you guys talk about this much. I'm going to say it all the time. Invite somebody here, right? And somebody that maybe they need to hear this message, need to hear this about this series. Invite someone. This is the perfect series to invite someone to because we're going to be talking about this. So let me explain this. Last week, I kicked off this series called You Matter. It's all this idea that we believe when we see people like the video showed, Democratic, Republican, young, old, whatever age, that we all matter. That when people think of revolution, we want them to see this church and be like, hey, that's a church that says I matter. And the reason they say I matter is because God says I matter. And you matter because God says you matter. And so in a world that says what they're against all the time, we want to be very clear. We want people to know you matter because God says you matter. And be able to accomplish that mission, we kind of talk this idea that you have to live like that you have to realize that your worth and your value and your dignity and your honor comes from nothing that this world tells you it comes from, your job or your money, but it comes from your Heavenly Father who created you and He placed His value, your value on you. You matter because God says you matter. So that was week one. And if you haven't checked it out, go ahead, check it out. You can listen to the podcast. But today, it's kind of that next step. And it's not as fun as conversation. It might step on your toes a little bit. It might get up all up in your grill a little bit. But it's coming from a place where when I talk about these things, I'm really talking to myself. I'm just up here talking with you guys. But we're going to look at what do you do? Like, so I understand I have value, I have honor, I have dignity. It's been placed on me by God. But how do I live like that? And the real question is, am I living like that? So we're going to look at this encounter that Jesus has with a man, and I'm going to kind of give you a little preview. There's a man who was sick for 38 years. He couldn't walk. And one day Jesus walks up to this man and he says the question of the day. He says, do you want to get well? Do you want to get well? Do you want to get well? And so as we're having a conversation today, I want you to listen through a certain lens. I think that will help you get to where we need to go. And the lens I want you to listen through is this idea of a question we looked at last week. What do I want to be known for? When people look at me, what do I want them to say? And I want you to look at it through that lens. But I also want you to look at the same, with that question, that lens, but looking and answering this question. What's holding you back from the life that Jesus called you to? What's holding you back? What has gotten in your way? What are the things in your relationships, in your marriages, in your life? Is it a sin? Is it a substance? Is it a relationship? Is it the wrong person sliding into your DMs? Is it your temper? Is it your anger? Is it a habit that you have? What's holding you back from the life that Jesus has called you to? And with that idea, are you ready to overcome it? Are you ready to beat it? Are you ready to no longer let that thing hold you back? And I want to say this as we start. It's okay to come in here today. It's okay not to have it all together, right? We're all broken. We're all flawed. But out of love, it's not okay to stay that way. Something my parents did that I loved is I got in trouble a lot, guys. Like, I believe it or not, I did quite a bit. I got in trouble with my words quite a bit all the time. And my parents would correct me and they'd say, hey, it's okay not to have it all together. But it's not okay to stay that way. And I want to explain what that means. You matter. And it's not because I say you matter, but God says you matter. And he proved it by sending his son Jesus to die for you. And then Jesus comes in this world. And then Jesus starts hanging out with prostitutes and tax collectors and sinners. And he starts spending time with them and he loved them. And he's like, hey, you matter and you have value, you have dignity, and you have honor. But when he would leave that encounter, you know what he would do? He would say, but don't stay living this way. Why? Because I have something better for you. And when Jesus comes into our life, it's the same thing. Jesus never leaves you where you are. He calls you to something better. So if you're broken and you got some things going on and I'm broken, you're broken, if things aren't going the way you want it to, there's something in your life that's holding you back, it's okay. But the thing is, it's not okay to stay that way, right? We don't want you to stay that way because you matter and we love you. So that's what we're going to see today. Jesus is going to walk up to this guy and say, listen, I don't want you to stay this way any longer. And it's an ancient encounter found in the Gospel of John, and verses will be kind of 1 through 8 today, 1 through 10. Jesus walks up to him, and here's what happens. It says this. Jesus went up to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish festivals. So he's going into the city of Jerusalem. Now there is in Jerusalem, near the sheep gate, a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades, which are basically these steel-like porches. So it's a swimming area, this pool area. And here, a great number of disabled people used to lie. The blind, the lame, and the paralyzed. So we're introduced in this scene that Jesus walks into Jerusalem. And as he's walking in, he goes to this area where no one else really would want to go unless you needed to go. He goes to this pool. Now, we got to understand, this pool isn't like the Midwest Paradise above-ground pool that we have in our yards. It's kind of like this pool that would have been in the ground, and if you can imagine with me, there would be steps here, and you would go into it, and there would be rock and dirt. But there's a really important word here. It says it's near the sheep gate. What's that? Why does that matter? Well, that basically right there tells me I would never want to get in this pool. Why? Okay, there's a swimming pool and there's a sheep gate. The sheep gate is where you take your sheep, and do you know what sheep are? They stink, and what do? They poop, right? They poop everywhere. So they poop and they stink, and at this time in the history of the world, you wore either no shoes or sandals. So you would walk in, you'd put your sheep in the gate, right? Kind of like where you park your car today. And then you would walk in, and maybe you had some poop on your feet or dirty feet. Where's the next area you'd probably wash it at? The pool. So this is the dirty sheep poop pool. And around this pool, at least that's how I imagine it. And around this pool is a unique scene. It says there's the blind, the lame, and the paralyzed. And the lame don't mean like, hey, that's a lame person. That means just people who are sick or can't, there's something going on they can't overcome. And these are a group of people that would have felt at this time in history like outcast. People that you wouldn't really spend time with. Most people would assume that they were unclean or dirty, or maybe someone in their family did something that caused them to be this way. And they're all hanging around this pool. Now, why are they around this pool? Are they suntanning? Like, hey, man, we're going to look good, you know? Or are there guys over there doing, some bicep curls for the girls? Like, why are they hanging out by this pool? Are they just enjoying it? No, there's a legend. There's a legend that these people believed in, that an angel, see, it's a legend. An angel would come down, and the pool, they would stir the pool. Because that pool, every once in a while, it would move. And they thought it was an angel, an act of God was stirring this pool. And the first person in this pool would be miraculously healed. So it's kind of a sad scene. The blind and the lame and the paralyzed and anybody else who wants to be healed would go to this pool, and they would wait for it to move. And the second it moved, you would have this mad rush of people trying to get in this pool. Now, was the pool could pool actually heal them? No. It was actually a spring. It would cause it to naturally move. But all these people around the pool looking to be healed. And it's kind of it's really human, right? Like they're running to a pool, and we all have things that we run to when we're trying to get well. But they're all there, and they're hanging out. And what happens is that Jesus comes up to one of these specific men. And here's what happens. Well, here's what we read. It says, one who was there, who had been an invalid, so couldn't walk, for how many years? How many? 38 years. You know how long 38 years is? I don't. I haven't been alive for 38 years. But it's a long time. 38 years ago, I believe if my math is correct, was 1984. You know the number one movie in 1984? Ghostbusters. I have not seen that movie, so don't judge me. Another movie was The Karate Kid, sweep the leg, that guy, The Karate Kid. The number one song in 1984 was, let me get this right, When Doves Cry by Prince. Never heard of it, didn't know Doves Cry, but apparently there's a song about it. I'm just trying to get a picture in your mind. About 38 years ago, some of you were dressing a little bit like this. All right, this is Breakfast Club. Now, somehow that's what people dress like today still now, but it's come around. But this was the outfit, I just Googled 1980s style and fashion. This is what people look like. 38 years. It's a long time. A long time to go to the pool and be hopeless. A long time to be discouraged. A long time to be in pain. It's a long time. And Jesus walks up to this man who'd been going to this pool, laying on a mat for 38 years. And this is what Jesus says to him in verse 6. When Jesus saw him laying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked a question. The question is, do you want to get well? Do you want to get well? And now on the surface, let's be honest, this is kind of an insensitive question. But it's also an obvious question. It's like asking a homeless person, hey, bro, do you want $100? Or it's like asking me, hey, Nathan, are you going to watch football after church today? I was like, yeah, that's why I'm preaching a little shorter today. Like, come on now. Or it's like asking Whitney, hey, do you want anything pumpkin spice, even though it's September? Oh, yeah, she does. Anything, okay? It's an obvious question. Do you want to get well? But Jesus is asking it because maybe it's not such an obvious question. Does he actually want to get well? It says he's been in that condition for a long time. These words are in there for a reason. It's like insinuating that there might be some doubt. Does the guy actually want to get well? And why I love this question is because the original question in the Greek isn't do you want to get well? The question is a much deeper question. The question is this: do you want to be whole? Ooh, that's a better question. Do you want to be whole? It's like, do you want to be whole from the things that are causing holes in your life? That's causing you to not get what you want? Do you want to be whole from the situations that are hurting you? Do you want to be whole? And the emphasis is on the you. Because you know why the emphasis is on you? The greatest influence for you to change your life, or the greatest convincer in your life, psychology tells us, is who? You. The greatest voice that you listen to, or the strongest voice that you listen to in your life is who? Is you. So Jesus walks up to him and says, do you want to be well? But he actually says, do you want to be whole? So let me ask you that question. Do you want to be whole? But I want to add a little to that. Do you want to experience the whole, better, abundant life that God has created for you? Are you ready to live like you truly matter? So this is where the rubber hits the road. Like, what is this? Because we can walk, we're not paralyzed, but there's a reality here, and the reality is Jesus is saying, like, not everybody wants to get well. But we got to look at this through our lens, all right? Our lens is our thing. It might be a little different. And I like to say it this way. I'm real creative with my words. We all have our thing, right? We all have our thing in our life. We all have that thing that's creating issues in our life, that's keeping us from being well. We all have that thing in our relationships, in our marriage, a habit, a sin. We all have a substance. We all have our thing. And it's keeping us from being well. And the question I want to ask is, do you really want to get well? And the deeper question is, do you really want your marriage to get better? Do you really want to beat that habit? Are you really ready to change? Are you really ready to embrace this idea that you matter? Do you want to get well? Because Jesus is asking and implying, maybe everybody who says they do or acts like they do doesn't actually want to get well. So what I want to do today is I want to look at three phrases together. Three phrases to think about when we're trying to get well. Because I'm gonna assume that all of us want to be made whole. I'm gonna assume that all of us want to overcome the thing that's holding us back. So I'm gonna assume that, and what I'm gonna do is I want to look at three phrases that we're gonna need to have in our lives that will remind us, if I want to get well, if I want to be whole, I need to remember these phrases. And the first one is real simple. In order to change, you have to change. In order to change, you have to change. In order to get something new, you have to do something new. This man had been laying there for 38 years. For 38 years, he was doing the same thing. He wasn't changing. Nothing was changing. So in order to change, you have to change. It's kind of like this. Imagine you want to get in shape. You look in the mirror one day, you're like, whoo, all right, it's time, right? We got 3 gyms in this town. I need to get a membership to one of those gyms. So you decide that. And so what you do is like, hey, I'm going to go work out at the Purple Palace Planet Fitness, okay? I'm going to work out there, and I'm going to have a workout plan. I'm going to get a trainer. You're going to pay for the gym membership. You're going to go on Instagram, and you're going to follow all the people in the church who look muscular. You're going to follow all the influencers. You're like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get in shape. And then you never actually go to the gym. Did you actually get in shape? No, you wanted to change, but nothing changed. Then I also think of my college job. I worked at a Kankakee tank wash with my stepdad. My stepdad was my boss, and listen, guys, it does not go well, right? Working for family does not always go well. But it was a good paying job. I hated the job. It's why I was like, hey, if ministry doesn't work out, I cannot do this blue collar job. I can't do it, Jay. Like, come on, man. I need an office job. So I went into ministry instead of the tank wash. But at the tank wash, it paid well, but you worked hard for your money. And I hated it, but your boy had to go on some dates, right? He needed some money. I wanted some nice clothes. I wanted to look fresh. So I was like, hey, this next summer, I worked there one summer, but I need a raise coming into it next summer. So I went to my stepdad and said, hey, can I get a raise? Or what can I do to get a raise? And to my surprise, guess what he starts doing? He starts giving me a laundry list of things I need to do. He's like, you need to text less, you need to do this and this. I'm like, well, listen, bro, I think you misunderstood my question. I wasn't asking you as a worker, I'm asking you as your son. I don't actually want to change anything. I just want more money. And he's like, well, then you're not getting more money. And I said, well, wait until I tell mom and she has something to say about it. Right? And guess what? I did not get that raise, but I wasn't willing to change. I wasn't willing to do something new. And I think there's a reality and there's a tension that we live with, is that not everyone is willing to do what it takes to get well. Not everyone is. Now, we may say we are. We may look like we're ready to get well, but not everyone's willing to do what it takes to get well. Not everyone's willing to do that little word that's so hard. Change. So Jesus is asking, do you really want to change? Like, I'm going to offer you this opportunity, but do you really want to change? Do you really want this? And do you know what one of the major struggles that I see with people in the faith, and especially in my context of doing ministry the last 12 years or so? A lot of people say, well, the number one struggle is doubt. And that's actually a struggle. I mean, many people have doubts. Some people say, well, it's churches, and there's some church hurt out there. Some people say it's this or this obstacle. But do you know what I see as one of the greatest stumbling blocks or hurdles? It's a little word, one word, and that word is familiarity. Familiarity. What do I mean by that? I mean, we become so familiar with the thing that's holding us back. Do you know how our minds are actually wired? Science tells us this, that our minds are wired in such a way, and this is how habits create. It takes a certain amount of time to create a habit, but the more you do something over and over again, it actually creates a neural pathway in your brain, and the more you do something, the easier it is to do. So like maybe you drive the same drive to work every day. You may get there and you're like, man, did I even have my eyes open? Like I don't even remember doing anything, but your brain has created a pathway. You could do it in your sleep. And the more you do something, the more something happens to you, the more familiar you become to it. And the more familiar something is, you know what it's harder to do? The harder it is to break it. And so the more familiar we become with that thing that's holding us back, the more familiar we become with a sin, a temptation, a struggle, the harder it is to change or overcome it. And the more familiar we become with our situation, the harder it is to move. And the more familiar we become with going to church and just singing and hearing sermons and doing nothing else, the harder it is to do something else. So I think that's what we have with this guy here. Because I have to assume Jesus is asking this question for a reason. And I don't know, and I don't want to be too hard on him. I'm not paralyzed. I can use my 2 legs. But I think after 38 years, even if I had to egg roll into that pool and I couldn't swim, I'd find a way to get into the pool. I'd at least crawl, bear crawl. I'd tuck up like a ball and roll. I don't know. I'd do something. I'd just flop in that water. But he hasn't done anything, it seems. So Jesus is like, hey, my man, do you want to get well? He asked that question. And here's the guy's response, right? We said, well, the response should be obvious, right? Yes, sir, the invalid replied. And I kind of imagine, he's like, dude, do you remember I can't walk? He's like, I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I'm trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me. So he doesn't say, yes, I want to be healed, heal me. You know what he says? He gives a list of excuses. They're valid, right? He's like, I can't walk, Jesus. Like, dude, I can't move on my own. No one wants to help me. I don't feel like I matter. I have no one to carry me into the pool. No one even cares about me enough to do this. And then while I am trying to roll or crawl in, guess what? Other people go down ahead of me. But what I think is happening is I think Jesus knows that this man hasn't tried in a long time. And he gives a list of excuses, and maybe we do too. We're like, man, hey, you just don't know what family I come from. Or you don't know what that person said to me, or you don't know, like, I can't get a job because of this, or I can't overcome this because of this. We get all these excuses and reasons. So Jesus is like, hey, do you want to get healed? This guy's like, listen, can't walk, I'm too slow. The way things are, or the way things are always going to be. And maybe that's where you are. The way you've been in that situation for so long, you're like, the way things are, or the way things are always going to be, and it's no hope. I can't get better. That comes to the principle number 2. If you do what you've always done, guess what? You'll get what you always got. If you keep doing the same thing you're always doing, you're going to get the same results. 38 years, we don't know how he got there, but for 38 years, this man would lay on this mat and watch everybody else get in the pool. And day in and day out, whether he slept there or not, day in or day out, for 38 years, he did the same thing and got the same results. And maybe, just maybe, again, I'm just asking, as we're living life and we're trying to overcome this thing in our lives, the thing that's holding us back, only you know what it is. You want to beat it, but maybe you keep doing the same thing. You keep going back to the same habit. You keep going back to the same relationship. You keep going back to the same person sliding into your DMs, and you're doing the same thing you've always done, and somehow you're just expecting different results. But the reality is you're going to get what you've always gotten. And I love this quote. It says this. It says, you cannot change what you're willing to tolerate. You can't change what you're willing to tolerate. And maybe for some of us, the thing in our life that's holding us back, that's keeping us from being whole, is something we've been tolerating for far too long. If you tolerate the bad relationship or the issues in a relationship, you can't change them. If you tolerate being stuck in the situation, you can't change it. Now there's a reality. You may be in a situation and you don't like it. You may be in a situation right now that you don't like. But you're like, hey, I'm not tolerating this. And even if I take small steps, at least I'm changing. And maybe this guy's like, hey, I've just been here for so long. I don't know how. And he's tolerating something that he doesn't have to tolerate. And maybe you in your life, you're tolerating something that Jesus said, listen, I'm trying to give you freedom from it. You just got to change a little bit. You got to be willing to get well. And maybe you come in here today or you know someone and you're like, listen, I just don't see how. I don't know what I'm going to do. This is too big. And you've come in here with this mindset that you've accepted what is rather than believing what could be. So when I look at that, maybe Jesus is asking this man, like, hey, are you ready to stop accepting what's been normal and ready to start believing in something new? And maybe today, are you ready to stop accepting what is and to start believing that Jesus can do something new? So Jesus hears this man's response, and we get a little peek into what's going on next. It says, then Jesus said to him, get up, pick up your mat, and walk. And at once the man was what? Say that with me. The man was cured. And he picked up his mat and he walked away with a little swagger, it says, right? The day on which this took place was the Sabbath. So the Jewish leaders said to the man who had been healed, is it the Sabbath by the law? It is the Sabbath. The law forbids you to carry your mat. So Jesus says, hey, I hear excuses. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to get up and I want you to walk. I want you to get up and I want you to walk. He's like, well, what do you want me to do? I want you to get up and I want you to walk. Matter of fact, I want you to get up, I want you to pick up your mat, and I want you to walk. And in this moment, this is the moment. Here's where the rubber hits the road. Does this guy try to get up? Because he doesn't have to. Does he try to walk? Does he say, like, I'm paralyzed, I can't walk? Does he let go of his excuses and try to stand up? Or does he get up and walk? He has a moment to decide. And what's he decide to do? He decides to what? At once the man was what? Was cured, and he picked up his mat, and what did he do? He walked. And I imagine he walked a little bit with a little bit of swagger, right? He's like, hey, I come in here paralyzed, 38 years, I'm walking out, man. The biggest chicken legs of all time, but I'm walking out looking good, right? He walked. What does that show us? Again, we may not be in the same situation, but it shows us this promise that the way things are, or the way things have been, aren't the way things have to be. It's okay not to have it all together. It's just not okay to stay there, right? The way things have been in your life don't mean that's the way they have to be. For 38 years, again, we know how long ago that was. 38 years ago, think of Prince, think of Ghostbusters, a long time. For 38 years, this man went there day in, day out, and got the same exact results. And then in one moment, boom, with one word or one sentence, what could he do? He could walk. And I'm just saying this. With one decision to make Jesus the Lord of your life, one decision. You may not be healed right away. You may not get up and walk out with a little bit of swagger. But in one moment, I can tell you from personal experience, and you know stories here, but one moment, one decision can drastically change everything in your life. One decision, one moment, one decision, and one moment. The promise is that the way things have been aren't the way things have to be. And when you realize, and you get to the point you realize that you matter, that you have value and honor and dignity that were placed on you by God, and it manifests itself in Jesus coming in this world to die for you, and Jesus is calling us to follow him. He's like, follow me and you'll become whole. Follow me and I will change your life. And that moment, with that decision to do it, your life will change drastically. Now, it may take time to get the full results you want, and you may never get the exact results you want. But things can change that fast. But it starts with a question. Do you want to be made whole? And here's what's awesome. For things to change in your life and in my life, we just have to be willing to get up off our mat. You just got to be willing to get up. You don't got to be perfect. You don't have to have everything figured out today. You don't have to come in here with things not together and leave with things together. You just have to be willing to say, hey, all right, today is the day. Enough is enough. I'm getting up. I'm standing up off my mat, and I'm trusting that Jesus is going to help me overcome this thing that's creating holes. And I believe the only way to get a hole in my life is through Jesus. All you have to do is be willing to get up off our mat. I have a friend. His name's Ethan Jones. I met him in college. I met him on first day of college orientation, actually, and I didn't actually meet him in person, but Ethan stands out for a very distinct reason. If you saw Ethan, Ethan walks with a very big limp. Almost so noticeable, you're like, hey, I'm nosy enough, I want to know what happened to this guy, right? Like, what happened to him? So over time, I started to get to know Ethan and figure this out, and he tells me this crazy story. When he was in 8th grade, he was riding a bicycle. He's from a small town in Illinois, and he was riding on a major intersection of this small town. And the semi was on one side, and he was on the other side, and a van went to pass the semi into the lane that he was on his bicycle and hit him. The van was going 40 miles an hour, hits him on his bicycle. They rush him to the hospital in St. Louis, and they tell his parents, hey, get ready for the worst. Your son's going to die. That's what all the doctors said. And they said, by some chance, if he makes it out of this situation, he'll be brain dead. He'll never be able to walk again. His life will be drastically changed forever. Well, Ethan lived. He was not brain dead. Doctor said, hey, Ethan, you're never going to be able to walk. But through months of rehab and months of recovery and years of recovery, eventually Ethan was able to walk again. But Ethan's life was drastically changed at that moment by something he did not choose and something he did not do. He was an 8th grader, a teenage boy riding his bicycle. And in that moment, his life changed. He was a good athlete. He loved sports. He loved being active. And all the things that he found purpose and value and meaning in life were taken away from him as a teenage boy like that. And it says that it brought him in the rest of his teenage years into college years, it brought him to this dark place where he would go out and party, and he would go out and do things that he knew he shouldn't do just to try to numb the pain a little bit. And one day he said, I found myself in this dorm room, alone and isolated, not knowing what to do. He said at that moment, as he's telling me the story, he says, at that moment, I prayed for the first time in a long time. And he says, the way that things are going aren't working. That my way isn't working anymore. I need something to make me better. I need something to make me whole. And then he said, I prayed this prayer, Nathan. I want to show you this prayer. And it changed his life, but it also changes my life and how I live every day. And here's this prayer. It's real simple. God, I'll do my best if you just do the rest. I'll do my best. Ethan's like, I don't know what my life's going to look like. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'll do my best, God, if you'll just step in and do the rest. I want to be made whole. I want to be made well. And here's my promise to you, that if you say, God, I'm going to do my best, guess what? You're still going to fail. I'm going to fail. You're going to fail. We're still going to have shortcomings and failure. But God, when I fail, will you just do the rest? God, I'm trusting you to fill in the gaps, to do the rest. And when I think of Ethan's story, and I think of my story, and when I think of other people's story, there's this form of Japanese art that I'm not even going to try to say the name. But what they do is they take a glass bowl or a plate, and they break it with a hammer. And then they get this little mixture of gold, and they put some other stuff in it, and it becomes like this glue. And they try to place these pieces back together, and the finished product looks a little bit like this. And these go for thousands of hundreds of dollars. Listen, guys, if you want someone to break a plate for you and put some gold in it, I will do it for you for much cheaper. But you see this finished product here. Can you still see where it was cracked? But in the cracks, what do you see? You see the gold. You see the beauty. When I think of our lives, this is a picture I often come back to. That we're broken and we're flawed and we got all these things that create cracks in our lives. But the amazing thing is we don't have to stay that way. That God loved us enough, that we matter enough to God, that he sent his only son to die for us. That the promise is that if we want to get well, he will place us back together. But, here's what's so beautiful. you'll still see the imperfections. You'll still see the cracks. And you know what I love about the cracks? You can wear them like a badge of honor and say, listen, this is who I was. This is when I wasn't well. This is when I wasn't whole. But look at what Jesus has done for me. And he can do it for you too. So the question is, as we wrap up, it's a question I've said 1,000 times today. Do you want to get well? Are you ready to let Jesus take you into the life that he's called you to? Are you ready to let him fill in the cracks and to wear those cracks like a badge of honor? But are you ready to get something in your life that only Jesus can offer? Let's pray. God, we are so thankful, so thankful that you don't keep us in our mess, you don't keep us in our past, you don't keep us in our pain and our struggles, but you give us the opportunity to get well, God, and be made whole. Father, you love us enough to say, hey, I love you how you are, but I want so much more for you in your life. Don't stay where you've been. Father, so today, as we continue to worship in a moment, Father, I'm going to give anybody opportunity to find me or go to the prayer room for that next step, God. We're going to sing a song called Something Has to Break, God, and I know there's someone's story in here today that something has to break. Father, and we would love to have that conversation with them today. It's in your name we pray. Amen.